Friends, there are so many stories vested in the darkness of the past. The colonial British thrust, the sandwich of Hitler's genocide and Holocaust, the massacre of Mongolian barbarians, the butchers of American Red Indians, and the partition of Indian subcontinent in 1947, as well as the slavery of the black Africans, leads only the disasters to innocent people and the pure minds of the kids. This is the story of Anne Otto Frank. Welcome again, friends. A girl said that she has been thanking to her father. Why? The reason is behind. What was the reason? She said, thanks to my father who had brought my whole collection of picture postcards and movie stars here beforehand, and I have been able to retreat the walls with a pot of glue and brush and so turn the entire room into one big picture. There is a hiding place in the secret annex on the Princess Gast. In July 1942, the Frank family went into hiding. The Van Pels family followed a week later. The two families already knew each other. Herman Van Pels worked for Otto's company. For months later, they were joined by an 8-person Fritz Pfeffer, an acquaintance of the Frank family. There was a first year of Anne. Anne Frank was born in the German city of Frankfurt and Maine in 1929. Anne's sister Margot was 3 years her senior. Unemployment was high and poverty was severe in Germany. And it was the period in which Adolf Hitler and his party were gaining more and more supporters. Hitler hated the Jews and blamed them for the problems in the country. He took advantage of the rampant anti-Semitic sentiments in Germany. The hatred of Jews and the poor economic situation made Anne's parents, Otto and Edith Frank, decide to move to Amsterdam. There, Otto founded a company that traded in the pectin, a gelling agent for making jam. Nazi Germany invades the Netherlands. Before long, Anne felt right at home in the Netherlands. She learned the language, made new friends and went to the Dutch school near her home. Her father worked hard and went to a Dutch school near her home. Her father worked hard to get his business off the ground. But it was not easy. Otto also tried to set up a company in England. But the plan fell through. Things looked up when he started selling herbs and spices in addition to the pectin. On September 1939, when Anne was 10 years old, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, and so the Second World War. Not long after, on 10th May 1940, the Nazi also invaded the Netherlands. 5 days later, the Dutch army surrendered. Slowly but surely, the Nazis introduced more and more laws and regulations that made the lives of Jews more difficult. For instance, Jews could no longer visit parks, cinemas, or non-Jewish shops. The rules meant that more and more places became off limits to Anne. Her father lost his company since Jews were no longer allowed to run their own business. All Jewish children, including Anne, had to go to separate Jewish schools. Anne has to go into hiding in the secret annex. When Margot received a call up to report her so-called labor camp in Nazi Germany on 5th July 1942, her parents were suspicious. They did not believe the call-up was about work and decided to go into hiding the next day in order to escape persecution. In the spring of 1942, Anne's father had started furnishing a hiding place in the annex of his business premises at Pilchgast 263. He received help from his former colleagues. Before long, they were joined by 4 more people. The hiding place was cramped and had to keep very quiet and was often afraid. On her 13th birthday, just before they went into hiding, Anne was presented with a diary. During the 2 years in the hiding, Anne wrote about events in the secret annex, but also about her feelings and thoughts. In addition, she wrote short stories, started on a novel, and copied passages from the books she read in her book of beautiful sentences. Writing helped her pass the time. When the Minister of Education of the Dutch government in England made an appeal on Radio Orange to hold on to war diaries and documents, Anne was inspired to rewrite her individual diaries into one running story titled Hate Hatcheries, The Secret Annex. Here is the diary, the picture of the diary of Anne Frank. The diary Anne receives for her 13th birthday. This is the photo collection from Anne Frank's teaching in Amsterdam. Anne started rewriting her diary, but before she was done, she and the other people in hiding were discovered and arrested by police officers on 4th August 1944. The police also arrested 2 of the helpers. To this day, we do not know the reason for the police raid. Despite the raid, part of Anne's writing was preserved. 2 of the helpers took the documents before the secret annex was emptied by order of the Nazis. Via the offices of the German security police, a prison in Amsterdam, and the Westbrook transit camp, the people from the secret annex put on transport to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration and extermination camp. The train journey took 3 days, during which Anne and over 1,000 others were packed closely together in cattle wagons. There was a little food and water and only a barrel for toilet. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, Nazis doctors checked to see who would and who would not be able to heavy forced labor. Around 350 people from Anne's transport were immediately taken to the gas chambers and murdered. Anne, Margot and their mother were sent to the labor camp for women. Otto ended up in a camp for men. In early November 1944, Anne was put on transport agent was deported to the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Margot, their parents stayed behind in Auschwitz. The conditions in Bergen-Belsen were horrible too. There was a lack of food, it was cold, wet, and there were contagious diseases. Anne and Margot contracted typhus in February 1945. They both died owing to its effects, Margot first and shortly afterwards. Anne's father, Otto, was the only one of the people from the secret annex to survive the war. He was liberated from Auschwitz by the Soviet troops, and during his long journey back to the Netherlands, he learned that his wife Edith had died. Once in the Netherlands, he heard that Anne and Margot were no longer either. Otto Frank see this picture standing in the attic of the secret annex a few hours before the official opening of the Anne Frank house in 3rd May 1960. The photography as taken by Arnold Newman. Anne's writing made a deep impression on Otto. He read that Anne had wanted to become a writer or a journalist, and that she had intended to publish her stories about life in the secret annex. Friends convinced Otto to publish the diary, and in June 1947, 3,000 copies of the secret annex were printed, and Anne's diary becomes world famous. And that was not all. The book was later translated into around 70 languages and adapted for stage and screen. People all over the world were introduced to Anne's diary and story, and in 1960, the hiding place became a museum. The Anne Frank house until his death in 1980, Otto remained closely involved with the Anne Frank house and the museum. He hoped that readers of the diary would become aware of the dangers of discrimination, racism, and hatred of people. Anne and her family spent 2 years hiding from Hitler's soldiers known as SS and the Gestapo. While she was hiding, Anne wrote down her feelings and thoughts in a special diary. Even though she was suffering, Anne wrote about hope and love. She lived in a world full of hate but believed that people were still good and that a better world would come soon. Anne isn't alive today, but her words are saved in her diary. Kids all over the world read Anne's diary. They learn about what it was likely to be a Jewish kid during World War II. They also learn that even when terrible things are happening, you don't have to give hope. Friends, let's jump into the think tank. The Nazis were prejudicial against the Jew. Have you ever seen prejudice in your own life? Can you describe what happened and how do you felt? Let's comment.